On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're talking linebacker. What happens when Nakobe Dean returns from injury, plus a first look at the upcoming matchup between the Eagles and the Jets. Rookie report, all that and more on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's J-A-S-E medical.com. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we're getting you ready for Eagles-Jets this Sunday. And Gino, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I think the Eagles are a heavy favorite for a lot of reasons. We'll dive into the matchup earlier, I should say later on. But first, I want to get into the linebacker position because yesterday the Eagles activated Nakobe Dean's 21-day practice window. And this is interesting because in August, in all of the summer, we said Nakobe Dean's like the only player we trust at this position. After you lose TJ Edwards, you lose Kazir White. You didn't really have anything else behind him, right? We're talking ourselves into, Christian Ellis to play at this position, Nicholas Morrow, and we're like, they're signing Myles Jack and Zach Cunningham off the street. But then suddenly, Myles Jack gone, right? Zach Cunningham has to play, Nicholas Morrow has to play over Christian Ellis, and they've been really good over the last month in replacement of Dean. So suddenly, I think people are actually posing the question when Nakobe comes back, despite the apparent role of being the green dot every down linebacker. Suddenly people are asking the question, does he get his starting job back? Which is, I still think he should, but it just goes to show how well Morrow and Cunningham have played.
I think you're in an interesting position, especially with the emergence of Nolan Smith over the last couple weeks, of what you're going to be able to do in terms of sub-package deployment with all of these guys. I don't think it's going to be one guy's just going to be a pure starter.
Sure.
One guy's going to just take all of the snaps. And if it is, I think it's going to be Nakobe. I mean, that was their plan coming into the season. I don't see why they're going to divert from that,
right.
Especially after Morrow's performance last week. It's like, he came back to earth a little bit, and it's like, This is what he could be. And this is why he wasn't on the active roster just a couple weeks ago. But I do look at the position that you're in, and now with Zach Cunningham and how incredible he's looked in coverage as well. And Nicholas Morrow has been a pure blitzer at times that has really come to wreak havoc on some offensive lines. You saw 3 sacks out of him. And then Nakobe Dean, it's like he can kind of do everything here. So now does that give you an extra piece to help in your matchups, especially with Sidney Brown coming back, Lou? I like where they're headed in terms of adding these guys in that back 7 that are matchup pieces that you can do different things with. And don't get so hung up on what the percentage of snaps is going to be. And I don't even think Nakobe will get all of those snaps come this week against the Jets because of that injury. You kind of want to ease him back in, but it could be a nice little preview into what we see. I mean, it could be a 33% split between the 3 of them, and you could see multiple looks with all 3 of them on the field for the first time all year with 3 linebackers. Maybe that's something that Sean Desai wants to deploy. Or you see more of these penny looks where it's just Nakobe and they go heavy up front with 5 guys. And I think you're just now getting those reinforcements back at a pretty good time because you're starting to take shape of what your identity is as an offense and as a defense specifically. And now you're going to get your green dot color back and maybe your most athletic defensive back in Sidney Brown as well. Right. Count me in for these guys being back this week.
Yeah, huge additions for the Eagles defense, getting Dean and Brown back. And I understand why the question is being posed about what is Dean's role now, because although we've loved the hype about Nakobe Dean, the potential since they, I think, stole him in the 3rd round of the draft a few years ago, at the same time, we have not seen this kid barely play. 1 game this year, some limited snaps in 2022, basically a redshirt year behind Edwards and White. Morrow and Cunningham have been good. Cunningham has been one of their best players against the run. He's been very solid in coverage. As you mentioned with Morrow, he's been great at coming downhill, especially in the blitz game. And so I understand why you'd be like, at linebacker, don't fix it if it isn't broken. But to me, it's like Nakobe Dean, again, we haven't seen him play, but there's been nothing on the field that's shown us, oh, he needs to be replaced. And honestly, I think Morrow's been good coming downhill, blitzing, but I think Dean can make all the same plays that Morrow can and more. I think he'd be better in coverage. I think you mentioned the turnovers that did not happen last week because of Morrow. I think Nakobe catches that interception. I think he probably recovers that fumble. So I think he could probably do, not to discredit what Morrow has done, but I think Nakobe could replace him in that role and make those plays too. Again, we've seen nothing to show that he can't. We haven't seen him actually do it either, but the only doubt is the unknown with him. But I think it's still worth putting him out there. And then you can always go back to Morrow if Dean struggles.
If you just look at it black and white, is this a positive or a negative for the team? I think this is such a positive
it's a good problem to have. And we didn't think this problem was going to be possible at linebacker this year at all. We thought maybe one guy could play, and now they've got 3.
We're sitting there saying, how often are they even going to have 2 linebackers on the football field? And now we're saying, do they have 3 linebackers on the field at some point? But I think
that I don't want.
No, I definitely don't either. I'm all for nickel dime. Go. They even went big dollar one snap this year, which I didn't even know was the terminology, where you go 7 defensive backs out like that. But Nakobe Dean is exactly what you have to have at linebacker. How you said with Nicholas Morrow, like, he's really good coming downhill. There's sometimes in coverage, it might be a little bit of a lapse. And Zach Cunningham, I think he's been the better of the 2, in my opinion, just from a consistency and an overall well-rounded point of view.
I agree.
But Nakobe can do all of these things. And we had such high praise, and it's not going to change what I was thinking 5 weeks ago before the season began. It's like, I want him as the green dot caller. He makes that Philadelphia identity on defense where he comes downhill, he'll hit you in the face, and he's only 5'11", and he still hits you with the thunderous roar. And I'm excited to have him back, and to be here where you have too many guys at a position. That's where you want to be, especially at linebacker, because we have seen, and I take 3 positions, for example, running back, safety, and linebacker, the variance between the very good seasons of those positions and the variance of the very bad of those seasons. And I think you're probably right above average, if not a little better than the performance that you've gotten out of Morrow and Cunningham, Lou. I mean, It's not Kaiser White and TJ Edwards, of course not, but it could be the first year of TJ, and when you got some decent play out of Alex Singleton at times, and probably a little bit better than that, in my opinion.
Sure, and that's the thing. I think these guys have played well, but not good enough to me to not see through this Nakobe Dean investment at all. I don't want this to be the Trey Lance of defense at linebacker, where it's this top-tier NFL, draft talent, and you just never see him play. Because maybe Dean can't play, but we still have no clue. We've only seen him in 1 game this year. So I think he will return to the starting lineup when he comes back. Again, activates that 21-day practice window. Will he play against the Jets? Not sure. Maybe it's in a week. Maybe it's against Miami. We'll see what happens there. But definitely a good problem to have, that we did not think the Eagles would have these kind of options at linebacker. But Cunningham and Morrow, they've played really well, and now they'll get Nakobe back. And as you mentioned, Sidney Brown, he'll be back as well. We have our rookie report later on in the show. But coming up next, we got to take a first look at Eagles-Jets this Sunday as the Birds try to get to 6-0 on the season. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And today's show is sponsored by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Lyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And it's Tampa Bay Buccaneers starting quarterback Baker Mayfield, who I have to start this week. Anthony Richardson just can't stay healthy, but I'm actually really excited about it. I picked up Baker on waivers, and to the surprise of many, he's been a borderline QB1 in fantasy all year. They've been a really good passing attack in spite of Tom Brady leaving. He's got the weapons, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and I think he's going to have to keep up this week as they play a red-hot Detroit Lions offense.
I think us as Eagles fans saw what Baker could do against the pretty good defense, and now you have Baker Mayfield, who's in a division, Lou, right now that is for the taking, and this guy has won. He's a winner, man. Like, I like Baker Mayfield. It might not be the best option. It's not Tom Brady, but from a fantasy element, you're going to get his legs. You got the 3 weapons that you could chuck that ball down the field to. I love the opportunity to have a quarterback, regardless, as long as they're throwing to Mike Evans. If you have him and Chris Godwin on the other end, which Baker Mayfield does, count me in for that pick all day long.
Plus volume. The Buccaneers do not run the ball very well, so they're going to throw a lot on Sunday. Vinny Lyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED, headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast. We appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. It's a Wednesday edition of the show, and it's time to get into our first look at the upcoming matchup between the Eagles and the Jets. The Jets, by the way, Gino, still have never beaten the Philadelphia Eagles, and I don't think that's going to change on Sunday. This is a pretty good defense that's held some great quarterbacks in check this year, right? Josh Allen had his worst game against the Jets. So did Patrick Mahomes. But I still think with the way the Jets offense is run by Zach Wilson without Aaron Rodgers, it would be a massive upset if the Eagles lose this game.
They're coming off an emotional high here in Denver, Colorado, too, man.
Sure.
The Nathaniel Hackett revenge game. They have invested so much into that. They go out and beat Denver. It's a very good defense. It's exactly the type of defense I would love for Philadelphia to have. And they're close, but they don't have a Sauce Gardner and they don't have Robert Saleh calling their defense. Sean Desai is good. But I look at the quarterback position, Lou, and when I was making my coffee, I had this thought this morning. Have the Eagles, outside of last year when Wilson was the starter, played the Jets first-string quarterback in like the last 6 years? Because remember, it was like the Mike White game a couple years ago, right? Didn't they play Mike White?
Well, I remember 2019 when they sacked them like 11 times. They had multiple quarterbacks.
Yeah, who was the guy at that time? It wasn't Mike White. It was
Trevor Siemian playing for the Jets at that
It
point?
might have been, but this is just another
bad.
It's another outing where they're playing their backup. It just seems every time they get the Jets on the schedule.
Well, in the one year they played
starter.
Zach Wilson, Gino, Gardner Minshew starting for the Eagles.
And they beat him. And Gardner Minshew beat Zach Wilson. But that's what you have to come down to is, can you keep Zach Wilson in the pocket? Can you get him out of the pocket? And can you finish on him and get him down to the ground? That's what it's going to come down to. It's going to be, get this guy off his spot because he is hectic, man. He'll hold on to the ball and do some crazy Carson Wentz type things where you're like, okay, we're going to get an interception at some point in this game.
And the difference is, like, Carson sometimes would make those plays. Zach Wilson doesn't really make those plays ever. And this is going to be, to me, probably... And Wilson's played a lot better the last 2 weeks. He had his best game a couple of weeks ago, Sunday Night Football against the Chiefs. Even this past week against Denver, he was a game manager, but a pretty solid completion percentage. No touchdowns, still had a pick. So he's still one of the worst quarterbacks in football. And that's the thing, is with this pass rush, the way the edge rushers finally blew up against the Los Angeles Rams, I think they should have a day. And honestly, Gino, this isn't a quarterback to respect all that much. I'd send the heat like they did last time. That was the recipe against Wilson a couple years ago. I would do the same thing and just stack the box. Just go after the kid.
Make him think, man. A ton of simulated pressure. Like, put 6-7 guys in the box.
Yeah.
They've done a great job doing that. This is the Nolan Smith and Nicholas Morrow double A gap blitz type of game, right? Where you mug them the first time you pop them into coverage. Next time you throw the blitz at them like they did last week. And this is that game we've been talking about, Lou, where those sacks should come. Matt Stafford got the ball out in 2.45 seconds last week. I don't see Zach Wilson coming to anywhere near that number, in my opinion. And I expect these guys, especially with Elijah Vera Tucker unfortunately being injured, he will be out for the year. He's probably one of the better offensive linemen for the Jets. I like their matchups, like Mekhi Becton on that right side, Lou. He's a big dude. You can get under his pads quickly. I like that matchup with Hassan. I like the matchup inside with Jaylen Carter. And once again, Lou, what are we talking about? The Eagles' defensive line against another team's offensive line having to create pressure on the quarterback. And quite frankly, I think that's going to win them the game because I think the Jets might put together a couple good drives with Breece Hall in the run game. But then after a while, maybe after those first 15 scripted plays, the Eagles are going to settle in and that defense is going to do exactly what they do. They're going to take away the run and they're going to force you to pass. If the Jets go down in this game, which I think frankly is bound to happen, that's a dangerous position because then Zach Wilson holds on to it. That's when you see the sack numbers start to pile up. And I don't think you're going to get 11, but you're going to get something big.
Yeah, I agree. I think the focus should be on stopping Breece Hall, who definitely has his legs back from last year after that torn ACL. He had a great game against the Denver Broncos last week, but this is the number one rushing defense in the league, so not overly concerned there either. And then, I mean, they do have Garrett Wilson, who's one of the best young receivers in the league. But when you have a Zach Wilson, I mean, Garrett Wilson has just not been able to reach the ceiling of his potential this year without Aaron Rodgers. So I honestly would, I mean, you could say shadow him with Darius Slay, but I don't even know if I would do that this week. Again, considering the quarterback matchup, and you have Bradbury on the other side. They're moving Bradbury back to the boundary. I think you can expect Bradley Roby to be the starting slot corner for the majority of this game. And so, yeah, man, unless the defense just totally shuts down Jalen Hurts, I don't know how the Jets win this game. And again, the Jets defense has been good. Mahomes and Allen, worst games of the season against the Jets. But when you look at the statistics, like the Jets are in the middle of the entire league with turnovers, rushing yards per game, passing yards. Not like they've been one of the top 5 units in the league. Not to discredit them, but you've definitely been able to move the ball on them this year.
I think this is going to be one of the tougher matchups for the Eagles, especially because the way that they do run their defense, they're going to give you a boatload of different looks. And they have the guys on the back end that can make those plays. I mean, they have a solid back 7. They have a solid front 4. But the thing is, the Eagles, even against the best defenses in the league, have been able to do exactly what they wanted to. And the first couple games with Jalen Hurts in the passing game, it wasn't pretty. But over the last 2 weeks, it's like, yeah, he can go out there and really do exactly what he wants to. And it's going to be a tougher test than the Rams. We know that. But Jalen Hurts is going to be able to move this ball. And I think the idea of establishing the run early on against this Jets defensive front, that would be a way to just incite fear into them, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, if we could get Quinnen off his spot, if we could get Jermaine Johnson and all those guys off their spot and still run this ball successfully, well, then they're going to have to bring the guys down, respect that run a little bit more. And I think that opens up the pass game for the Eagles. And this should be a game, Lou, where the offense has no problem moving the ball, in my opinion. The Jets are going to hunker down at times situationally. I think red zone, another tough week. It's going to be tough to punch that ball in. But if you could create those explosive plays and really make the Jets get outside of their defensive identity and not let them control the pace, because when the Jets defense controls the pace and they do what they want to, that's been the tough outcomes. But the Eagles offense trumps just about anything right now.
Well, here's the thing too, Gino, like this Eagles team, I would much rather play an elite defense than an elite offense, because I think how good the Eagles offense is, as you mentioned, even when you look at, this Tampa Bay Buccaneers rushing defense is really good.
Right.
This passing defense has really held teams in check. The Eagles are so talented, though, that I still think strength against strength, they end up winning those battles more times than not. So I think if you're going to play a team that has a very good unit, I'd rather have it be the defense for sure. So I think the Eagles should be heavy favorites in this one. How do the rookies get involved on Sunday against the Jets? Our weekly rookie report coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
Before we do that, we have a message from our friends over at Jace Medical. If you haven't been here listening to the show and don't know what Jace Medical is, I'll break it down for you. The Jace case provided by Jace Medical provides you with 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And why would you need this? Well, here in Denver, Colorado, we go hiking in the mountains a lot. Sometimes, especially with T-Mobile, we don't have great service. You lose service. Let's say I fall, cut my knee, and I need some help. Well, good thing my fiance, well, now wife, is a nurse practitioner, but we still have to carry around the Jace case, because even when you think you are prepared, you don't want to be caught unprepared. These antibiotics will help you in the biggest of emergency situations, regardless of where you are. Anybody who wants to plan for the future, anything from natural disasters, travel, pandemics, don't want to scare you. I just want to make sure that you are prepared. And you can get in on the action today over at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. And you can get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout. Make sure you go to jacemedical.com. They'll provide you with the Jace case, and you will be caught prepared without being unprepared.
This is the Locked On Eagles podcast. We thank you so much for making us your first listen each and every day. And everybody, football season, it's here. We're a month plus in. Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, Kyle Krabs, they're going to break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, betting angles, all of that and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts. Every Friday, Locked On NFL Kickoff Live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. All right, Gino, it's time for our rookie report this week. And man, was it yet another elite dominating performance from Jaylen Carter. And it was
I love him. I genuinely love the kid.
He's one of my favorite players in years, I feel like, on defense. I've not really, everybody knows me. I like passing the football. I like offense. Like, I'm your typical fan. But this is the first time in a while there's been a defensive player in the Eagles where I'm just like fanboying over. He's that good. And to outshine, how cool is it that he outshined Aaron Donald on Sunday? 2 sacks, blowing up double teams when Aaron Donald couldn't against Suo Peta and Jason Kelsey. I mean, Carter was the violence he plays with. It almost feels like, Gino, it's like the first time the Eagles have had a top tier, like villain almost type of star. And like, it's not that he's unlikable, but with the violence, if that makes sense, he just feels like this like villain, like not a dirty player, but he's just so violent and like terrifying to other offenses. And, you know, Fletcher Cox has been that way in the past, but I don't know, man, it feels different with Jaylen.
It's like the Bruce Banner to the Hulk thing. It's like the Hulk never meant to do bad things.
Sure, he's just technically a hero, but he is terrifying.
Yes, he's terrifying. Absolutely. Right. It's a baby rhinoceros.
Even his own team is kind of scared of him a little bit.
Yes, that's exactly how you want to put it, right, Lou? Yes. No, that was a great analogy. But I think the most impressive thing about Jaylen Carter isn't even what he's doing on the field. To listen to him in his press conference after that game, some of the things he said are, you hear from, 10-year veterans. He was saying, somebody asked him the question about, Matt Stafford got the ball out quickly today. He's like, I was on the plane with Matt Leo, who is, I think, now one of their offensive assistants. He was he was in the player pathway program for a while, but he's like, I sat there with Matt and he went through what all the offensive linemen did. He told me what they did well, what they did bad. And we saw Stafford getting the ball out and he's like, we just have to get after him faster. I'm like, what a mentality to have. It's like you can go and get stuck in the mud and be upset about not getting to the quarterback and like getting a paw on him, but they just keep hitting that rock, man.
Especially the guy that's getting double teamed more than anybody.
Yes,
he's the one that should be the most frustrated.
And he's not, and he's so likable, and he knew exactly what he meant to that team in that moment, especially without Fletcher Cox being there. Yeah. And this is the best rookie performance we've seen in, the 21st century. Like, I could for sure say that right now. He's on a different level. He's one of the best guys in the league at the moment, and we got to pump the tires that he's going to be one of the best long-term, but that consistency, if it stays like this, that trajectory is through the moon.
It's hard to not make that take considering how generational he looks. Players with 3+ sacks, 2+ forced fumbles, and more than 4 tackles for a loss in their first 5 career games since 2000. The list is pretty short. It's Von Miller, Chandler Jones, Shaq Leonard, and Jaylen Carter. By the way, the only defensive tackle on that list. Carter's the only defensive tackle with 2 or more forced fumbles and 3 sacks in 5 games of any defensive tackle, as I mentioned. And his top, he has the number 1 pass rush win rate among all tackles this year. But if you compare him to edge rushers, veteran star edge rushers this year, he'd be 10th.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Among all edge rushers. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. I had to process that for a moment. It's like, you're talking about a guy who probably has 45 pounds on each of these guys. He's just as quick as any of them, right? His get off, his first step is banana land. And how he continues to fight through reps and not give up. Dude, he doesn't give up. He goes to every ball. He pursues all day. There's so many times when he backside pursues a guy 6 to 7 yards downfield. Very reminiscent of that fumble he caused a couple weeks ago, where I was thinking in this game this past weekend, I'm like, he's going to get one of those because guys don't see him coming behind him. All he has to do is get his hand in there. He's so darn strong. And you can already say between him and Jordan Davis, it's like the future's great. This is exactly what we wanted.
Yeah, and that's the thing is there were like effort questions with Jaylen, especially after his pro day in March. And I don't see that at all. Honestly, and that first sack was a hustle sack, right? He turned, this guy instantly turns back upfield if the ball's going the other way. Like, he's not just going after the quarterback and then giving up on the play. Like you said, you'll get that forced fumble against Tampa Bay. He turns back upfield and punches the ball out like he's Captain Falcon from Smash Bros, if anybody knows that reference.
Falcon Punch, my favorite
Falcon Punch,
baby.
yeah, exactly. So Jaylen Carter continues to be one of the best rookies we've seen in a very long time for not only the Eagles, but the entire NFL. Micah Parsons level player right now as a rookie when it comes to his impact. Gino, when it comes to other rookies too, I really like what you actually mentioned earlier in the show with Nolan Smith, and we've been calling for this a few weeks now, and his role's been getting bigger and bigger, but against Zach Wilson, how about you send the blitz more and you throw him through the A-gap? But we mentioned this last week. I think this is the matchup to do that for sure.
And Zach Wilson is a guy who is a pretty good athlete, and I think he's going to be on the run a little bit, and if you want to make sure you have somebody that can run a 4-3 in open space,
right,
Nolan Smith, I love the idea of doing that this week. And I just looked on Next Gen Stats. Zach Wilson averages 3.05 seconds time to throw. That's
plenty over this defensive line, dude.
That's over half a second longer than what Matt Stafford held the ball for last week. That's a problem. And Nolan Smith, his best thing is his explosiveness, his closing speed. And this is another one where it's like, dude, get him on Mekhi Becton. Especially because you saw what he did. It's DeJuan Jones, the right tackle for Cleveland in the preseason. Such a big guy handling such a unique type of build as an edge rusher.
Mismatch for Hassan Reddick. That's a great point. Same for Nolan.
It's the same. I mean, maybe even better for Nolan because he's that much smaller, right? And I think they're going to try to exploit that right side, overload. And Nolan Smith is one of those guys that you can use as that piece where it's like, okay, is he going to pop back into coverage? Has looked really good as an overhang defender in coverage. Or is he going to hop off the edge, hit me with speed to power, and I got to worry about this guy getting to my quarterback? And I love how they're continuing to just feature him a little bit more and a little bit more. You're just getting more and more of a taste of what he can do. And he'll be a full-time player probably week 12 to 13, I would say. He's just not a full-time player in the defensive fronts like 45% of the snaps.
Continue to go up. Right. Yeah. I mean, you hope he's the clear fourth edge rusher that rotates in over Derek Barnett. You hope the percentage a little more split. The thing is, though, I don't want to say with Brandon Graham because Graham's playing so well right now, but they are different roles too, for sure. But yeah, each week, let's see more of Nolan Smith. Gino, hopefully we get Sidney Brown back this week as well. He was out with that hamstring injury against the Rams. And with Bradley Roby playing so well in the slot, maybe now Sid can go back to that, traditional safety look. And I love that because Justin Evans stinks. I've been saying since August, this guy can't play. He was terrible last week against the Rams. Terrell Edmonds was terrible against the Commanders. Just let Sidney Brown be the full-time starter next to Reed Blankenship now when he's healthy. I think that's got to be the move going forward.
I never want to see Justin Evans take 100% of the snaps in any game ever.
Sorry. I never saw it. When people said he was going to get the first crack at starting safety, it never made sense to me.
You made the comparison to Sendejo the other day, and I just freaking laughed.
Just because that was the last time I saw a safety, I'm like, why? I don't see anything. I don't get why. What does he do?
And I'm the aficionado of that position, and I'm with you, man. I'm just not even going to say it at this point. Like we know it's clear the drop off between Reed, Sidney, and then him, right? But you should get him back. I think it'll take the burden off of another rookie and Eli Ricks, who got thrown in there, man. Like, he did an okay job.
I like that they tried him in the slot. Me and you actually mentioned that on the show a few weeks ago. Maybe give him a look, but to do it against Cooper Kupp and he's on an island one-on-one, that's your first snap. I mean, talk about a welcome to the NFL moment. I mean, well, that's actually what happened week 2 as well. He had one snap and it was against Justin Jefferson inside. So this he's getting thrown into the fire quick.
He did a better job than Goodrich. There was one rep from Mario that I felt so bad, dude. He couldn't get his feet in the ground, and he literally face planted first trying to cross the field. I'm like, it's just a tough matchup, and to put him in that position. But Eli, I love to see him more involved in that they are cross-training these guys because you have to, frankly, if Avonte is going to be the guy that you want to roll with, you're going to have 3 guys realistically that can play that nickel position. So continue to cross-train. But I think they're okay there with Bradley Roby. But if Sidney Brown comes back, now the intrigue starts to come in because Bradley Roby, they used a lot as a blitzer off of the edge last week. Can you use him and Sidney Brown now in looks where you can send one of them off the edge, pop one of them back into coverage? I just love that the reinforcements are starting to show up, Lou, and you could start to play that full game, use your full pitching arsenal now with Sean Desai, and it starts a lot with those rooks, man. Great Howie Roseman draft class once again.
And I actually love to, you got to give a shout out to Ricks and Keely Ringo from a special teams perspective. Mike Clay made sure to mention both of those guys, how well they've played on special teams, which, Gino, by the way, according to DVOA, is the #1 special teams unit in all of football. So shows how far we've come there, too.
Yes, sir. I tweeted that out today. The Philadelphia Eagles special teams unit is actually pretty good. And Mike Clay, I'm sorry for what I said in the past, but
you weren't wrong at the time,
warranted.
though. We're not going to,
warranted.
Exactly.
But they're good. They're very good. I think they're in a position now where they know their identity. Jake Elliott is money. Anything from 65 in, you're taking a shot with him. But let's hope they can punch it in the red zone so they don't have to get there. But Britton Covey, man, I wish he was a rookie so we could talk about him on this segment. It kind of feels like he redshirted last year, but they're in a good position, man. A lot of youth, a lot of young players that are making big-time plays. It should put your mind at ease because back in 2017 and 18, it's like, how long are they going to have these guys? Now it's like, how long can we have these guys?
That's a great point. We'll continue to get into this Jets matchup tomorrow. Crossover Thursday with Locked On Jets, a Friday show as well. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. That's going to do it for today's show. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.